Hey friends, it's Miss Bab. I'm back with the next chapter. It's chapter 4 of our book, Haunted Castle on Hallows Eve. Just make sure that you're paying attention so that you can answer the questions that Miss Bab has on Seesaw. And also, just to recap, we just read chapter 3, and that chapter was all about how Annie and Jack and Teddy were in the village and they met some new people, and they ended that chapter by finding the stone wall of the castle. So we were predicting to see what we would think would happen next. So now we can compare our predictions to see if it's true or if something else actually happened in the book. So I'm going to get started. This chapter is chapter 4. It's called The Castle. The castle was still and silent. No candles burned in its windows. No guards stood at its gatehouse. No archers patrolled the tops of its walls. "Hello," Teddy shouted. No one answered. "Not very well protected, hey," said Teddy. "Our mission should be easy." "Yeah," said Annie. Jack didn't say anything. He would have felt happier if guards had been protecting the castle. That would have seemed more normal. "Come along," said Teddy. Jack and Annie followed Teddy over a wooden bridge to the gatehouse. There was a great picture of the castle and what they were looking at. There they are standing on the gate bridge. It looks like there's some birds up there. I'm sure that probably is a raven. Teddy held up his lantern before the arched double doors. Cobwebs sparkled in the misty night. "Hello, may we enter?" he called. Silence. They all stared at the heavy wooden doors. "Never fear, I shall get us in," said Teddy. The boy sorcerer put down his lantern. He took a deep breath. He rubbed his hands together. Then he stretched out his arms and shouted, "Open ye woken doors." He looked at Jack and Annie. "Quick, what rhymes with doors?" Floors?" said Jack. "Good," said Teddy. He opened his arms again and yelled, "Open ye two oaken doors, or we will not mop up your floors." Nothing happened. Teddy looked at Jack and Annie. "Bad rhyme," he said. Annie frowned and nodded. "Are you sure they're even locked?" said Jack. "Let's see," said Annie. She pushed on one door. Jack pushed on the other. Slowly the doors creaked open. "Ha, brilliant," said Teddy with a laugh. "Shall we?" He held out his hand and waved at Jack and Annie through the open doorway. The castle gatehouse was cold and empty. Jack could see his breath in the sharp air. He heard a creak. They all turned to look. The heavy doors moved by themselves and closed with a thump. Then they all stared at the doors for a moment. Then Teddy broke the silence. "Interesting," he said cheerfully. Jack tried to smile. "Indeed, interesting," he said. He shivered. He couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from the fright. Now, he wondered, now are we entering the tunnel of fear? "Onward," said Teddy. He led them through the empty gatehouse onto the shadowy castle grounds. There were no signs of life anywhere. Jack thought of the woman's old rhyme. "Where is the girl who spins wool into thread? Where are the boys who play chess before bed? Where is the hound who waits to be fed?" Jack wondered what the rhyme could mean. What girl? What boys? What hound? Teddy crossed the courtyard to the entrance of a large building. Jack and Annie quickly followed them. Teddy held up his lantern so they could see inside. There were rows of clean, empty stalls. Saddles and bridles hung from the pegs on the walls. Hay was piled in the corners. "Must be the stables," said Jack. "But no horses," said Annie. "No matter, 'tis orderly," said Teddy. Onward. He led them to the open doorway of another building. Teddy's lantern shone on a brick oven, a stone hearth, baskets of apples, and strings of onions hanging from the rafters. "The kitchen," said Jack. "But no cooks or servants," said Annie. No matter, it's orderly here too, said Teddy. Onward. As they wandered through the moonlit courtyard, Jack looked to his right and to his left. He glanced behind them. If there are ghosts, he thought, what would they look like? Halloween ghosts in sheets? See-through people like in the movies? He stopped. Hey guys, he whispered loudly. Wait a minute. What is it? Said Annie. Jack pushed his glasses into place. Are we just going to keep wandering from building to building? He said. What's our strategy here? Strategy? Asked Teddy. Jack means we should make a plan, said Annie. Ah, indeed, said Teddy. Excellent idea. A plan, yes. He grinned. How do we do that? Well, first we ask ourselves, where exactly are we going? Said Jack. Teddy looked about. He pointed to a tower rising above the courtyard. There, he said, the keep. 'Tis where the family lives, the Duke and Duchess. Great, said Jack. Now, what will we do when we get there? Climb the stairs to each floor, said Teddy. Have a look around. And if we see anything that's not orderly, we'll tidy it up, said Annie. Excellent, said Teddy. And then, asked Jack. Then we leave, said Teddy. Our mission is done. Jack nodded. This wasn't much of a plan or a mission, he thought, but he liked the leaving part. He hoped that happened before any ghosts showed up. Okay, he said, holding his lantern to light their way. Teddy led them to the entrance of the castle keep. He pushed open a wooden door, and they all stepped inside. Dark figures loomed against the stone walls. Ah, Jack cried. He jumped back, bumping into Annie. Annie laughed. It's only our shadows, she said. Jack felt silly. Right. Sorry about that, he said. He took a deep breath. Okay, let's find the stairway. Said Teddy. He started walking slowly down a dark passageway. Jack and Annie followed close behind. The air was heavy and damp. Jack's heart was pounding. Now, he wondered, now are we in the tunnel of fear? A moaning sound came through the passageway, then a loud bang. Yikes, said Annie. She and Jack grabbed each other. Teddy laughed. Was it only the shutters banging, he said. What about that moaning, asked Jack. 'Twas only the wind blowing in through the crannies, said Teddy. Jack took another deep breath and kept going. Soon they came to a twisting stairway. The stairs, said Annie. Good, thought Jack. Climbing the stairways was a solid part of their plan. Shall we? Said Teddy. Indeed, upward, said Jack, trying to sound like Teddy. Teddy held up his lantern and started up the steep stone stairs. Jack and Annie followed. They climbed around and around the twisting stairway. When he came to the first landing, Teddy led them to the doorway of a room. They peeked in. They saw rows of helmets, breastplates, shields, spears, and swords. The armor room, said Jack. Yes, said Teddy. Everything seems to be orderly here, said Annie. Jack nodded. He liked the order in the room. It made him feel safer. Shall we keep going? Said Teddy. Of course, said Jack. He was starting to feel a lot braver now. They returned to the stairs and began climbing again. On the third floor, they peered through an arched entrance into a huge room. Teddy used the candle from his lantern to light torches on either side of the doorway. In the flickering light, Jack saw a high ceiling and walls hung with tapestries. It's the great hall, he said, where they have feasts and stuff. Let's look around, said Annie. See if anything looks out of order. As the three of them slowly walked forward, Jack kept an eye out for a ghost. Teddy held up his lantern. It shone for a long time on the banquet table. Aha, he said. The table was littered with breadcrumbs, candle wax, and the petals of dead flowers. The floor near the table was messy too, with bits of food and meat bones. Finally, we found something to put in order, said Teddy. Shall we? Jack caught sight of a straw broom in the corner. Sure, I'll sweep, he said. I'll clear the table, said Annie. I'll scrape up the wax, said Teddy. Jack grabbed the straw broom and began sweeping the floor around the table. He swept up apple peelings, fish bones, bits of eggshells, and old cheese. As he swept everything into a meat pile, he felt good. They were finally carrying out their mission. We're bringing order to the castle just like Merlin told us. He thought, soon we can leave. Suddenly, Annie screamed. Jack dropped his broom and whirled around. Look, Annie cried, with her eyes open wide. She pointed towards a stone hearth at the other end of the great hall. In front of the hearth, a large white bone hovered in the air. It bobbed up and down. Then it began floating straight towards them. And that's the end of chapter 4. So I am curious to see what is going to happen in the next chapter. And I can tell you that the next chapter's title is called Ghost. So we'll see maybe if we encounter any of those ghosts that Jack has been a little bit frightened about seeing. All right, you can go over to Seesaw and answer some of the questions that I have for you. And I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and we'll continue reading this book together. All right, bye.